Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Your dial set correctly to a USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class today. Brad is engineering the broadcast at Genesis Communications Network in Minnesota. Thank you, Brad. I'm Vincent Finelli. Today, 2 great hours. Hour number 1, Maggie Craddick is going to be with us. And we're going to be talking about change. Hour number 2, David in Illinois is going to be with us. And as you remember, class, he was in the within the grasp of John Wayne Gacy, the mass murderer. David escaped, and he's going to tell us about his experiences with the police and things that you need to know. Maggie Craddock is faculty here at USA Prepares. She's been with us for a long time, almost probably 7 or 8 years now. And she provides assistance, guidance, and counsel to companies, corporations, and people facing the unexpected. Most people don't like change. Many are afraid of change. Some don't handle change very well at all. Human beings are like a routine. They like to go home after work. The thought of losing that home is terrifying. Maggie wrote a book. It's called Lifeboat, Navigating Unexpected Career Change and Disruption. And she uses metaphor to teach her classes, and she's taught large classes. Maggie is a CEO of Workplace Relationships. She's been featured on CNBC, ABC News, NPR. She's written lots of articles on the topics of workplace, meaning where you work. And Maggie and I have both worked in a large corporation or corporations, and she has a wealth of experience to share. And one of the metaphors that she uses in teaching is the Titanic. And you all remember the Titanic. The Titanic was ordered to be built in 1908. It was laid down. That means the keel was laid down in 1909. That's the first step in building a ship. It was completed in 1912. 8 days later, it went on its maiden voyage. Traveled 375 miles and hit an iceberg within 4 days of its maiden voyage. There were a lot of lives lost, a lot of mistakes made, and this was the ship of ships. It was the largest passenger liner afloat at that time. There were estimated a little over 2,200 passengers and crew, and more than 1,500 were estimated to have died. It was the unsinkable ship. Welcome, Maggie Craddick.
Well, thank you, Vincent. I'm delighted to be here.
Maggie, you are a dynamo. And, you know, I want to tell you, I've got your book in front of me. And when I received it, I asked for a copy of it, class. And I received the book from Maggie. And it's got white pages, black ink, blue cover. And that's the way I received it. But now it has white pages, black ink, blue cover, and yellow highlighting all throughout it. Dog-eared pages of the salient points that I think are just, I mean, it's got a lot of yellow because there's a lot of very valuable points in it. But the one thing that that makes me smile the most about your book, Maggie, is it's a page that doesn't even have a number on it. And I'm going to quote this because sometimes I use the word hit the lottery. Now, I don't play the lottery. I think a lottery is a voluntary tax on the uninformed. But what I mean by that is you got it right. And here's the quote. To my husband, best friend, and partner, Charles Snyder, whose presence makes the journey of life a source of infinite joy. Not everybody can say that.
Well, thank you so much, Vincent. I realize that not everybody can say that, but for those of us who can, we realize how important gratitude is with every moment we have in our lives on this side of the dirt, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And I simply love the focus that you bring in this program to things that aren't taught in school. And one of them is what really matters is how much we care about others. We talk a lot in that book about the shift from self-help to us-help. And I think in all facets of your broadcast, you're trying to do that, Vincent. So again, I'm delighted to be here.
Maggie, if it weren't for people, there wouldn't be much stress, right? And so,
isn't that the truth? That the truth?
Let me share a quick story with you, and then because I think this is class. When Maggie talks about the Titanic, it's the big ship. Okay, it's unsinkable. Everything is stable. It's steady. No worries until something goes wrong, and something went wrong really fast. The Titanic was the be-all, end-all. It was magnificent to the nth degree. And 4 days later, it listed. 2 hours later, it sank. And so we are on these big ships, many of us, we work for companies. And that would be the Titanic. And everything's good until something happens, something unexpected. Or something that most people don't expect. COVID-19 is one of those things. Working in restaurants, they're building restaurants like crazy all over Springfield, Missouri. I couldn't believe it. There's one on every corner. And if there was a spot between the corners, there was one there too. Well, most of them are out of business. All because of the unexpected. Maggie, isn't that what your book talks about? Isn't that the central point? How to deal with the unexpected?
Well, I loved your introduction, Vincent, because you went through such great detail about the Titanic. And for people who take the opportunity to read the book, they will see the timeline of what happened on the Titanic, but what I really loved about the way you set this up is you help people appreciate what was going on when they were building it, what was going on when they were coming up with the vision for it, because when we look at what's happening in our lives and careers today, in our families, right, we're facing some of the same timeless questions that those Titanic survivors faced. Questions like, how bad will this get, right? How long will this last? I mean, who can I trust for accurate information? And how is this whole thing going to change me and my life and the lives of my loved ones? And the way you set this up, Vincent, really helps people appreciate that what took the Titanic down started long before the ship left port, right? The Harland and Wolff shipbuilders and the White Star Line were cutting corners and rushing things for economic reasons. And there were red flags there, and people just weren't speaking up about them, right? And they're rushing through the icy waters of the Atlantic a lot faster than they needed to for that voyage. But it's because it was about impression management. It was larger than life. And throughout the book, I take this Titanic metaphor to help people appreciate the fact that we are experiencing changes on so many levels in our lives that we need a whole shift in our mindset. And what I try to contrast is what I call the big ship mindset. That's how everybody started off on the Titanic, right? And to be fair, you can't really say that the big ship mindset is always about size, because there are some large organizations around the world where people are striving to embrace more of a lifeboat mindset. But what you can say about the big ship mindset, Vincent, is it's rooted in old norms. It's rooted in what's been good enough in the past, right? And it stretches those norms to their optimistic limit. And what that does to people involved is it sort of incents them to always play their part, to fit in with the tribe, to suppress things they don't want to know about the situation, sometimes even about themselves, and to sort of minimize those difficult feelings and those red flags and just stay busy all the time. Keep that adrenaline up because, hey, it's tough enough, right? And then, just this idea that faster's better, and it's not always. And when we look at the lifeboat mindset, you think about the people that made it. Their lives were changed. Everything had changed. 1 minute, they're on a big ship that's heralded as unthinkable in the press. And the next minute, they're just huddled together with people they don't know in this tiny watercraft in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean fighting for their lives. And here's what happens in that situation in terms of how it impacts people. They've got to be present in the moment, Vincent, and at a very human level. They've got to see what they see, hear what they hear, and learn not to take their cues from how other people are telling them, what other people are telling them to do, but to trust that inner wisdom that they've got within themselves. Instead of rushing around, they need to take that strategic pause under pressure and be clear about the conversations they're having with themselves. How much of this is driven by emotion and fear? How much of this is more logical? And I think one of the most important things for people that are seeking to navigate this period and set themselves up for success going forward, whatever this new normal looks like, is that it's vital to align your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions in the present moment and stay focused on things like gratitude and doing the next right thing. Because the thing that characterizes an environment in which the lifeboat perspective matters is it's an environment where we have more questions than answers. And Vincent, doesn't that just about sum it up for what we're looking at today?
Absolutely. And one of the things that you bring up in your book, Lifeboat, is that titles can seem to go by the wayside when we're under stress. The person that had that big title, the boss, for example, or one of the bosses that told us what to do, may end up panicking. And we now look at that person as, that title doesn't matter anymore because we're in the fight of our lives.
Oh, absolutely. And, in the book, I talk about a lot of true stories for people I've worked with that have found a way to speak truth to power or found a way to work in really tight situations and realize if they start with that internal work in terms of having that alignment between learning to tap into their feelings and not being capsized by them, but just realize what they are. Take that strategic pause, manage their timing, do the next right thing. It pulls them through, it pulls their families through. Because what we're dealing with now, especially when many of us are working from home, and many of us, some people are working from home, some people are going back and forth into environments where there may be COVID, right? Mm-hmm. We really have to balance all of these different perspectives for how we're dealing with people at this critical time. But most importantly, we've got to clarify what's going on with us. Are we
Maggie,
allowing ourselves to...
Hold that thought. We're going into a break. We'll be right back. Maggie Craddock's with us, and we're talking about her latest book, Lifeboat. And it's about navigating the unexpected. And Maggie, I believe you mentioned Harlan and Wolff, the shipbuilder for the Titanic in 1908. And cutting corners. I've never mentioned this on the air, but I worked for a shipbuilder. One of my jobs I worked for Litton Industries. Mm-hmm. And Litton Industries made ships for the U.S. Navy. Mm-hmm. And the U.S. Navy, just a very quick story that ties to exactly what you said. Litton Industries was the shipbuilder. Large ships of war. And they were very good at it. There's no question about it. And the U.S. Navy was interested in making changes. And Litton Industries was interested in making a profit. So those two forces collided in one of the ships that Litton Industries built. And what happened was this aircraft carrier, it started at the bow and the stern, and you build toward the middle of the ship. Well, there were so many changes so fast by the U.S. Navy that when the ship was approaching the middle, the deck didn't line up.
That's great. That's great.
It's absolutely, it's true. It's absolutely true. So, Maggie, I believe you were mentioning that we have to look to ourselves to save ourselves. Is that where you were going?
That's where I was going, because if we go back and we compare how real people have made this lifeboat shift, from the big ship mindset to the lifeboat mindset, and then we compare this to a terrific example from history that unfolded on lifeboat number 6, right? So the guy that was officially put in charge of lifeboat number 6 was Quartermaster Robert Hitchens, right? And tragically for us all, he was the gentleman who had his hands on the wheel of the Titanic when it was going at full speed for that iceberg, right? And in one of history's examples of responsibility with no authority, he wasn't allowed to turn the ship without an order from a superior officer. His superior officer wasn't in the wheelhouse at the time. Finally, they pull it together at the last minute, and he does turn the ship, but of course it's too late, and tragedy ensues, right? So the next minute we pick him up in the Titanic story, again, he's an official member of the crew. He's leading lifeboat number 6, and he's on that boat with 2 other gentlemen and over 40 women. And so they're landed into the waters of the Atlantic. And the problem is these women really individually don't have the training or the physical strength to row these oars through the water. And Robert Hitchens, who is really operating from the lifeboat mindset, and he's trying, but he's breaking down. Because according to what he's been trained to believe about the odds of survival, it doesn't look good. And of course, he's got all these uncomfortable feelings erupting inside him. And what we can see about this, we can't know precisely what the man thought, but what we see is that he begins to just lapse into this litany of we're all doomed, and he refuses to row, and he's not helpful. Well, another person on that boat, who I've always felt is an inspirational figure from history, was Margaret Brown. And Margaret Brown was a civilian. She was a gracefully aging grandmother. The only reason she'd gotten on the Titanic in the first place was to get to the side of her seriously ill grandson. It was the first ticket she could get. Because if you look at the history of the situation, there was a coal strike in Britain. It was hard to get a ship. There was a lot going on at the time, right? So she's plonked into this lifeboat, and she's looking around, and she takes that strategic pause. She watches Robert Hitchens start to have a power struggle with Arthur Puchin, another very, highly celebrated gentleman from first class who was a friend of Captain Smith, who was the head of the whole Titanic. He wanted to be in charge. Hitchens wanted to be in charge. All these women are just looking at these guys, hoping they work it out, right? She's noticing a lot of people in steerage that are shivering. Well, she happened to be a passenger in first class, and a lot of them got on there with warm clothing and furs and everything they could haul on, because who knows? So she starts putting clothing on people that are cold. She starts listening to the other women from first class that are on that boat that are losing it because they're used to having things smoothed over for them. And Vincent, as we know, things were not going smoothly. Right? And then she gets a great idea. She realizes that if she organizes these people 2 to an oar, they're going to get that rhythm, they're going to keep moving, they're going to stay warm, and she does. She sort of gets them going 2 to an oar, and the ship starts to move. Well, Robert Hitchens doesn't like this one bit because he might be breaking down, and his leadership style isn't working, but he still wants to maintain that power. I'm the leader, and he tries to stop her. And at this point, Brown stands up and shuts him down. She says, if you don't stop with the pessimism, we're going to throw you overboard. And everyone in the boat unites behind her. And they do all make it to safety. But what I say about this with regards to the lifeboat mindset...
Hold that thought. We're going into a break. Maggie Craddock's with us, her book, Lifeboat. And it discusses navigating the unexpected change in one's life. And Maggie... you mentioned Margaret Brown, also known after her death as the unsinkable Molly Brown. So she was in a struggle for her own life and the lives of those on the lifeboat number 6, and she was at odds with the guy, Robert Hitchens, who had the title. That's what you were talking about, right?
That's what I was talking about. And, you know, I'm glad that you mentioned the unsinkable Molly Brown, because, Vincent, I think one of the reasons that I love this story so early in life is not only that my dad had that naval history on his shelf, he was in the military and loved history, but also because my mom took me to the musical. And when I saw the musical of the unsinkable Molly Brown, which many people, you know, think of the Titanic and the movies with Leonardo DiCaprio, but when I saw the musical, I really just went bananas reading about the histories of all these people. But meanwhile, you know, what I was saying about the lifeboat mindset is Margaret Brown is one of many people in the book who really took the time to stop, see what other people were doing, and align her thoughts and feelings and actions in the present. I mean, she didn't get on lifeboat number 6 because she wanted a naval career. She was seeking to be in command, right? She stayed in the present and looked for what she could do for others. And the strengths that she had, which kind of surprised her when she discovered this strength within herself she didn't even know that she possessed. And I think the lifeboat mindset helps a lot of people with that. But I always say that inner alignment helped greatness find her. There's a lot of things we don't have all the information, we can't think our way through. But if we stay focused on the present, on who and what matters to us, and do the next right thing, we're going to stay in that alignment and navigate this period until more information is revealed.
And what you're saying is so important. And class, it's all around us right now. If you think about it, the biggest decisions are in the mayor's offices, the governor's offices, and in the Oval Office, and of course in Congress as well. And what you're seeing is the lack of stopping to think about what the impact of decisions would be. So, for example, it's really simple. Masks, no masks, masks, no masks. Lockdown, unlockdown. Travel restrictions. No, it's okay. No, it's not okay. No, you need to have a health passport to go from one state or one city to another. This lack of pause is manifesting itself in total confusion throughout the entire country.
Oh, absolutely. And I think there are things we can do as individuals, really, because sometimes we're looking to our leaders, and sometimes, honestly, Vincent, I think that we have to look within ourselves, right, and not expect people to be fixing this, because people are running in a lot of different directions right now. There's so much drama. And, of course, as many people have noted, it almost feels like a civil war, but what's tragic is this is a civil war that can erupt at your dining room table, right? Many people have kids in their own families, really good friends on both sides of a lot of these issues, so that it's really difficult to have thoughtful conversations about them because there's a lot of intolerance there. And we fix this in very specific ways within ourselves first. One thing I encourage people to do all the time is look for every opportunity possible to do something for others without stopping to calculate what's in it for you. Don't stop to make that calculation. The people at the top are making that calculation way too much. Because if you stop, the moment may be over. If you're in a hurry, stop and give directions anyway. Be pleasant to people you meet. You know, people always say, well, what good's that going to do? And I say you never know who's watching, but you're always watching yourself. And we need to maintain our self-respect for our decision-making process under pressure, not just the decisions we make. That strategic pause is tough to do when you're scared, when you're anxious, when everyone around you is screaming information at you. It's hard to understand that inner voice. Well, it can be really difficult to take that strategic pause. I always recommend that people try to, in the course of their day, find 10 to 20 minutes to operate at half their normal speed and see what happens. Just let the adrenaline drain off for just a moment. It'll bring you that much closer to that emotional muscle memory. And the other thing is, when you're thinking, when you're making a point, when you're talking to people, you don't just want to focus on how you hope to come across or the point you want to make. That strategic pause that you're referring to, Vincent, helps you appreciate how other people feel about themselves in your presence. And I watch this all the time in terms of people trying to negotiate conflict in a way that fortifies their personal integrity rather than diminishing it, or make a point effectively. If you're just yelling at people with a lot of emotion, if they have a different point of view, they're likely to become defensive and entrenched in what they're doing. You have to have respect for the fact that one size doesn't fit all. Margaret Brown on that lifeboat approached people in steerage, first-class military backgrounds, and people that were just looking for an idea at a dark moment. And one size didn't fit all in terms of how she solved that problem. When we're dealing with our families at the dining room table, our teams, when we're trying to motivate them remotely, even sometimes what seems like the inner committee in our own head, you've got to remember that one size doesn't fit all. The reasons that people are emotionally moved by a certain issue or a certain point of view aren't the same for everyone. And when we take that strategic pause, we remember to listen for what's underneath their words. Are they blowing off steam? Do they mean what they're saying? So that we can not only get our point across efficiently, we can get it across effectively and become part of the internal conversation that people are having with themselves all the time, because that's where it's going to matter.
One of the reasons that we won World War II, class, is because the German army had a chain of command, and you followed that chain of command. And the Americans had a whole bunch of Molly Browns, literally.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
And
beautiful.
And if that commanding officer in the German army was killed or taken out of command, injured, it was a tough process for the German army to figure out what to do. Now the Americans, they just said, "Oh, it looks like he died," and they kept going. That's the difference, and that's who we are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And
we're a bunch of Molly Browns.
We are, and I've never heard anyone say that, Vincent, and I absolutely love it. You know, when we're looking for jobs, struggling with jobs, trying to arm our kids with the relational skills they need to get jobs in this crazy environment, right? What's going on? What's happening to our workforce? What's happening in our families? How do we all survive, right? This is the thing about making this shift from self-help to us-help. We have to think about this. We have to think long-term about how most of us get through this as a group by providing value to other people. And the Molly Brown analogy you just made with World War II, we have to empower ourselves to be problem solvers. You know, oftentimes people will call me up when they need coaching help, and they'll go, "Maggie, I can't believe I did that. That wasn't me. I blurted out something on national television I wish I could take back," or "I just hung up on a Zoom call with my whole team, and now they really think I'm a hothead and I've got to get back on, but I was so frustrated," right? And that just wasn't me. And I'll say, well, yeah, it is you, right? And this is what I would call a lifeboat learning moment around, censoring, because you've been suppressing feelings that just came out sideways, right? Or you're not practicing that self-care. But when they really understand this business about it's not just how we think, it's about how we maintain that sort of balance between our thoughts and our emotions under pressure. I'll have the same person call me back and say, "Wow, I was in a tense meeting. Everybody was going in different directions. And then someone said the perfect thing. There was a little humor, a lot of gratitude. It wasn't at anybody's expense. It diffused the situation." And then I realized that was me, because they've gotten used to giving themselves a break. They've gotten used to not operating from a false self within themselves. They've gotten used to actually saying, "I feel confused. I feel angry. I feel anxious. And you know what? That's okay. I'm going to give myself a break with that. I'm going to accept it. I'm going to try not to pretend it's not there and run off and overeat or overshop or overdo. I'm going to sit with it." When you're good with it within yourself, you get great with it with other people. And those are the kind of skills we need to internalize to keep our careers on track, to realize strengths we didn't know we had, so we can reinvent ourselves effectively at this time if that's necessary. Those are really the skills that we've got to model for the next generation, because they're going to come on stream and they're going to be the leaders of tomorrow.
Maggie, I've never told you this. I've never told the class this, but I had a job on the RMS Titanic. It happened to be a bank. And it was going down. We were going down. And people got the feeling that, this thing is this corporation is not going to survive. And what they did was they went into self-preservation mode. Literally. They kept their head down. They pretended to be busy. They didn't want to, be noticed by the boss because they were thinking that there are pink slips that are going to be handed out real soon. And if they keep their head down and don't get noticed, that pink slip will go to somebody else. That's what they did. And it didn't work. And the ship went down. It literally went down. And I was interesting, quick story. The boss, who never spent money, he said, Vin, let's go to lunch. I thought, gosh, he's taking me to lunch? What's up? So we were at this lunch, just two of us, and we were sitting real close to each other, across from each other, and he said, hey, Vin, I'm going to lose my job. So it's terrible. That's terrible. He said, yeah, they're going to lay me off. I said, oh, that's terrible. Oh, it's awful. And he said, well, don't get too excited because you're losing yours too. And he said, look, you're going to be the guy that turns the lights off. We're going to have to manage this chaos. We're going down, and there's going to be a lot of crying. It's going to be terrible. And you're going to be the guy that turns the lights off on the way out. That's it. So I've been there. It's terrible. And class, what Maggie's talking about, sometimes these leaders that have these, titles can't handle it. So you have to literally find within yourself the strength to make those right decisions. And panicking and melting down is something that you need to avoid. Don't waste your time doing that.
That's right, because when we talk about the strategic pause in the book, and, as you know, because Vincent, you've not only read it, I'm honored that you've highlighted it, right? We go through what goes on in people and how they take those strategic pauses so that they are in touch with their emotional wisdom. They're not denying their feelings or running away from them, but they're not capsized by them, right? They can face it, they can accept it, and they can move forward. And I think another thing I've learned over many years with the privilege of supporting some leaders in business and people who are just entering the workforce for the first time is, I've worked with people along the way that really had a reputation for being complete bastards under pressure. They were just seen as people who were only out for the bottom line. And under some circumstances, that was probably the case. And I've seen these same people in past meltdowns. It's 9/11 today, right? So there's a historic date for a lot of us, right? I've worked with a lot of leaders who went through 9/11. But
Maggie, hold that thought. Hold that thought. We're going into a break. Class, we're talking about Lifeboat, Maggie Craddock's latest book. And the big lesson here, as I understand it, is you're in charge of your own survival. Yep. And people do melt down under pressure. People whom you would not expect to melt down under pressure. Maggie, before we continue, and this is our last segment, how do we get your book?
Oh, you can get my book on my website, Vincent. It's Workplace Relationships, plural, all one long word, .com. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it on Barnes & Noble, any major bookseller. And if anyone follows Maggie Craddock on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook, you'll see ways to find it there.
And if it's ordered directly from your website, is it possible to get your autograph on that? Is that possible?
If somebody wants to order it from my website right now due to COVID, I hadn't thought of that. Maybe I can autograph some, but I don't know that that's going to be so easy. But if somebody reads it, orders it, reads it, likes it, and reaches out to me via my website by email, and they want to send it to me and have me autograph it, I will do that and send it back.
Okay, I'll tell you what Art Bell did. Art Bell did. He was, in my opinion, the finest broadcaster ever. And what he did is he signed a whole bunch of labels.
What a great idea.
Yeah, like 1.5 by 3-inch labels. And I guess he just signed a whole bunch and then shipped them off to the shipping warehouse, and then somebody stuck them on and mailed them out. But in your case, maybe if someone were to write you via email, maybe you could have a label and just put that in the mail and send it to them, and they can stick it on themselves.
What a terrific solution, Vincent. I love that. And you know what? For anybody listening, I would be delighted to do that. Absolutely delighted. I'm so hoping that these ideas will help people because, you're going back to the way that people melt down. And I will say that, we were talking about leaders. I've seen some great leaders make a shift. They've been jerks at one point, and the pressure boiled up enough, and before you know it, I've seen big firms close their doors or get into trouble, and people that, in the past had not been coming from their better angels shocked me in particular by being people who came and really pitched in and helped financially and personally keep their people on track. But for your listeners, the really important thing is to remember and be compassionate with yourself, and sometimes do your best to give others the benefit of the doubt, because you don't know what someone's capable of unless you've assessed their ability to evolve, to change, to grow in a more virtuous way. But remember, when it's business as usual, most of us are pretty logical. We're pretty strategic. We like to be objective. But under pressure, when that fear kicks up, that's when the black and white thinking, the snap judgments, the you're for me or against me stuff starts happening, right? That can take our thought process off course. Be in the moment, see what you see, hear what you hear, and trust yourself. Your decision-making process and having confidence in it is so much more important than any individual decision at a time like this, because the changes are just going to keep on coming. And our feelings, well, heck, I think we're all at a time that's very emotional because of all the stress. And under normal conditions, most of us can keep our game face on. Things happen that upset us a little bit, but we stay focused under pressure. We're cool, right? No. At a time like this, some of the most seasoned people I know that are really tough and resilient have called me up and said, it's 2:00 in the morning. I can't sleep, right? It just hits them out of nowhere. So be compassionate with yourself at a human level right now. It's okay to be confused. It's okay to feel kind of emotional. But remember, there's skills for dealing with this. We don't have to let it hijack our thought process, cause us to lapse into either frantic behavior that's taking us in the wrong direction or just feeling depressed and not being able to take the next step at all. We can hit those strategic pauses and operate effectively at this time, and we need to. We need to do that inner work so that we keep ourselves on track, because right now, sometimes we can't count on people to guide us. We have to be self-directed through part of this process.
There's a quick example I can share exactly that. 2 nights ago, we have cows right outside. We have a cattle farm, and I have cows right outside the studio. Got some young calves, and they're in like 5 acres right outside the studio. And at night, we heard this bark, 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 and of a couple dogs. And these dogs were about ready to pounce on our cows. And, of course, we had the equipment with us. Oh, yeah, we had the equipment with us to dispatch those dogs right then and there. It was dark. We had our flashlights. We had the scope. We had the laser. We had everything we needed. And our son and I were thinking, these dogs want to attack our cows. And I said, hold it. I think these are our neighbor's dogs. Let's give the benefit of the doubt. Let's go make a phone call. We woke them up and said, you have your dogs? Because it looks like there's some dogs that want to kill our cows, and we want them, or calves, and want to make sure that they're not yours. Do you know where your dogs are? And he said, they're not here. Let me call them. So that pause saved the lives of a couple dogs. And that is just a small example of what you're talking about.
Great story. Great.
Maggie, thanks so much. We got to have you back again and again and again and again, and we'll make that happen. Maggie Craddock.
Vincent,
available.
Thank you.
Amazon, Barnes & Noble, the book, Lifeboat. Thank you so much, Maggie. Everyone all set, cocked, locked, hour number 2 of USA Prepares. David's with us in Illinois, and David was in the reaching distance of John Wayne Gacy when David was younger. It was John Wayne Gacy, a mass murderer. So David has a wealth of experiences that some can't even imagine, and some of them are just horrific. And his father was a police officer. He had military experience. And David learned a lot when he was young through the firsthand teachings of his father. David, did I say that correctly?
Yeah, it was him and his buddies, because they were all either special forces out of Vietnam, in different branches of the military, and what they taught them, they taught me, because I'm there hanging out. So, I was a kid. Got to keep me busy.
Well, David, I learned about the get out of jail free card back in the 80s. I had a friend and a coworker, and he was driving a Saab 99E, I believe it was. And I think he was exceeding the speed limit. I think that was the case. I'm not 100% sure. But in any event, he got pulled over because a Saab back then was kind of an unusual car. Some might have said it was really stylish. Some would say it was the opposite of that. I would be in agreement with the opposite of stylish. It's kind of a funny looking car. Anyway, it was noteworthy to the police, and they pulled him over. And they wanted license and registration. He said, well, hold on, let me get it. It's in my glove compartment. So he reached over, and he had one of those Monopoly cards. And it said, literally, it said, get out of jail free. So if you played Monopoly, you've seen this card. And it's one of the cards on the board that you can draw. And it said, get out of jail free. And he handed it to the officer and asked him, can you use this? Does this work? And the officer thought it was so amusing that he kept the card. The officer kept the card and said, all right, look, slow down. I'm paraphrasing. Slow down. Have a nice day. And he got away with it. Whatever it was, he got away with it. Now, it wasn't a big infraction, I don't think. It was just a minor thing, but there was some humor in there with the get out of jail free card. So I did a little bit of research, and I found that the police have something, I believe it's called a courtesy card. I don't know what the exact nomenclature that's used within the Police Benevolent Association, but they have these cards that they give out. Sometimes they're business cards, and they'll have maybe a name and a phone number on them. And these are carried by people that are friends of the police and family. And they are the get out of jail free card. So what we're having, or we're seeing now, is that there's us and, the guys who get the tickets, and there are those who get pulled over and they pull out the get out of jail free card and they get away with it. What do you know about that, David? Is that true?
There's okay, each area is a little differently, okay, which just like when you brought up yesterday, I believe it was, about different laws, each area, you would be amazed. You could have 50 laws, all be the same law, but named differently, and they can charge somebody with 15 of those when they go to court. They're not gonna, they know they're not gonna get 15 on them, but the goal is to get at least one. To lock them in the system for whatever reason. Their revenue. That's just what it is. But yes, now kids, I was given some documents to carry when I went away to school as the high school because he was worried about somebody finding me. I actually cut mine up in class when I found out that they not only knew what they were doing to me, they wrote it down in the records and they discussed it in class. So I was a little furious about that. And the teacher tried to stop me. So later he gave me, when he went different federal government positions, he gave me some more cards, and I'm trying to find them because it showed every seal of every federal government seal he was blanketed under, and I was to show that. And whenever I did show that, yeah, they left. They just dropped and just no matter, and no questions asked, just gone. Now I've seen kids that are family. Most of the kids are really close relatives of police or politicians. They, in the local community, they would know who they were, or they would pull them over and check them. I've only seen a few girls, females, that were related that were out of control. Most of the females that were related were fine. It's the boys that were really out of control. The problem is, like, here's an example. My brother, for example, he was doing the same things they were doing, and you got them chasing him throughout the city with a whole string of squad cars. Well, they were fortunate because it was at night. The news would be there, and they would get him and hand him off to so many different officers and undercover people. There was no way to find out who he was to say, okay, that's because now the news is there. And that happened several times, and they would just take him back and get it wiped clean, and nothing would be said about it. But to show you how much this can go, it can go all the way from simple, which to me is not simple. To most people, that's not a simple situation when you're driving through a city chased by a whole, line of cars. And that's happened several times. But all the way up to the point of somebody being shot intentionally and covering that up because they were relatives. So they had to come up with something stupid to argue about why this shooting took place. And these are point-blank shootings. These are not just an act, but they would rule it as an accident. I'm like, how do you go from here to an accident? But that was a common thing. I mean, even all the way up to a shooting, they would cover it up. So yeah, it happens a lot. You'd be amazed how much. And if you knew, I'm sorry, but
I'm looking at eBay right now, class. You can go to eBay, and you can type in police courtesy card, and first result, 2020 PBA card, New York Police Department collectors, authentic, $50, $49.99. There are other cards that say, here's one, 2020 NYPD courtesy card signed. That's $75 plus $4 shipping. That's $79. So there are, there's a 1930s. This is like a collector's item, I guess. It's almost $200, $199.20. California Highway Patrol from 1930s. From 1930s. So these things have been going on for a long time. Now, my understanding, David, is that these are given so that if the children, for example, of the police get pulled over, they just pull out this card and they can get away with much of what they might have done. Is that really true? That's my understanding.
No, yes, and what they'll do often too is they will drive the vehicle that's assigned that they use when they're undercover. So the kids will drive the vehicle, and therefore they also are known because they check the vehicle to find out. So so they'll do that. But yes, I've actually went out and was in an incident where we were in another state, and the girl had her car. She just turned 16. They bought her a brand new car, and that's what these people got them, new cars. And yeah, she almost killed me, let alone everybody else. They were actually looking for me in the canyon for hours. But she had a card, and the sheriff was trying to be nice to her, and she's going off on it. He goes, "Look, she already showed me her document. I'm going to let her go. She almost killed people. Just calm this girl down." And no, you couldn't, still, but she got off. No, nothing, 3 other people got injured in that situation, besides her. But it happens all the time. You would be amazed at how many times, but I've seen it more with males. They're boys, than they really take it and run with it. I didn't personally like,
okay.
Sorry.
Okay. David, I'm looking at on eBay, and Minneapolis, Minnesota. There was some rioting going on, right? In Minneapolis,
yes.
Right? Jacob Frey was the mayor. A lot of protests became violent. Okay, so I'm looking at a vintage Sheriff's Department police courtesy card. Here's what it says. Vintage, 1949, Hennepin County, Minnesota Sheriff's Department police courtesy card. 1949. They've been issuing these, and it's good for the year 1949 through 1950. It's signed by the sheriff of Hennepin County, Ed Ryan, at the time. It was issued to a guy by the name of Carl Frey. Carl Fry, F-R-Y. This has been going on for a long time. 2 classes of people, those who get picked on and those who don't.
Right. And what you'll see, which surprised me, it doesn't surprise me that they actually issued cards back then, because who would have thought somebody would have, the word they don't like to use is a narc. so handing out, but today to hand out cards and things like that today, they would hand out their personal identification cards. That you got a problem, hand this over, they'll contact me. Because there's a trust factor involved there. Plus, there's so many. I mean, we got cameras, we got everything everywhere. So they're going to have to really trust somebody to hand them a document like that and sign it and say, here, just show this. Because that's they're going to have to come up with another stupid excuse why they have it if somebody does, point out that they gave them a free get out of jail. You see what I'm saying? Times have changed a little bit.
I think you're talking about there's eyes on the system, and I guess you're saying it's a little more risky than it used to be. Right.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you could do it in the day. It could be done point blank, and nobody would. It would be so out in somebody's face. What are you going to do to me? I got a badge and a gun. I can make your life miserable. And they had that attitude. Their attitude's been there. It's not stopped. And it still hasn't stopped, because if it did, you wouldn't be seeing. They know they got cameras on them, yet they're still shooting people.
David, when you say they're shooting people, you're talking about the police, right?
Yeah, the police. I'm sorry.
Hey, David, let me ask you this. I saw this firsthand. I saw a guy who was a former state representative in the corrupt state of Missouri, and he was going to park illegally. And what he did was he just took out his wallet, and his wallet had a gold badge, and it had it's a unique badge. It had a number on it. That number was traceable back to him. So let's call it number 123, for example. It's not the number, and a gold badge and a gold wallet that was presented to him when he became a state representative. And he just put that on the dash with the badge showing, and he parked illegally, and he said it'll be all right. I said, he can't do this. He said it's going to be all right. Let's talk about that when we come back. How far does this go? David's with us, and we're talking about the police, something that he is quite familiar with. He grew up with a father who was in the police and the military, and he spent a lot of time in the police cars and around the police and fellow police officers. And we're talking about how far does this go? For example, these courtesy cars, how far do these badges let state representatives go, and county clerks and jailers and deputies? And how far does this go, David? So in this particular example, this former state representative, he was not even a current state representative. He just kept his badge, and I guess they give you these badges, and it's like a lifetime get out of jail free badge. And so he just used this to park illegally. Now, I wouldn't be able to do that because the sign said strictly enforced towing. You will be towed if you park here. And he said, no, it'll be okay. How far does this go?
Yeah. Now, that's what you brought up, something that really surprised me when I was a kid and I found this out, because handguns were illegal in Chicago area in Cook County when I was younger, and it's different now. They keep arguing. But anyways, to find out that the citizens could not possess, and they had to go to the extreme measures if they had firearms in that area. But if you're elected to office, so this way it can't be argued you're doing preferential favors for politicians or vice versa. When they get elected, not only were they given a badge, they were given a gun. And I'm like, wait a minute. I thought, mind you, I'm a kid, so I'm asking these questions. How come I thought they're illegal? He's not a cop. And here's the other thing that I want to say. There's another way that they may not be able to let you off at the road. So what they do is, they know they want to get you, they owe you a favor, or you may be supplying somebody with drugs, and they know who you are. They just don't show up to court. So therefore the case is dismissed. Now, mind you, they're working. They could just be there at court, but they know they got to get this guy off for whatever stupid reason they come up with why they're not in court, or they just don't show up. Then the case gets dismissed. They get to walk anyway.
We often wondered about why that happens. And that's really nice to know. But I have to tell you that it seems to me that every time that I've been to court, pulled over for something that I didn't do, I challenged it. And the officer always showed up. I guess that, really, I've been pulled over. I was had a heavy load on the back of my pickup truck. I was all strapped down. I was in the slow lane. These cars flew past me on this little red car, and next thing I know, it's lights and siren, and I'm pulled over, and he said, cop says, you know why I pulled you over? And I said, yeah, I do, because you mistook me for that red car that flew by me. And and he said, well, here's what you were doing. I said, that's ridiculous. I was not. And I was doing 55 and like a 55. And so I went to court. And what they do is they try to get you to plead down. It's all about money. But the cop was there. He was there. And he had trouble remembering, which was a wonderful thing. But he showed up. But it was, small town speed trap kind of a thing. So,
well, they were wanting to nail you. They weren't wanting to let you go. That's why.
Right. How often does that happen, David, based on your knowledge?
It happens a lot. I've even seen it happen and heard about judges that were on heavy doses of cocaine, and their dealer would show up and they let the dealer go. They would just let the dealers go. The cops wouldn't show up, and the judge would, okay, nobody's here, you can go. Case dismissed. And it's not hearsay that, like, for example, that case, that he wasn't dealing with drugs, the judge, because the judge got caught with 2 kilos of cocaine. But since he was a judge, it was a sickness, and they couldn't do nothing. He was sick, he needed help. Everybody else gets thrown in jail for a long period of time. And yet he's deciding, that one judge. Now think about it. Elevate that all over the country, that's happening to.
I've heard
disturbing.
I've heard stories, and it's posed this way: is it better to know the law or the judge? And the answer is, it's better to know the judge. How true is that, David?
That's 100% accurate. I'm sorry, but that's
okay. All right, David and I will be right back after the bottom of the hour break. David in Illinois. David, I really appreciate you being with us, and we got another half hour to go. All right, we'll be right back. So, David, I mentioned the question, is it better to know the law or is it better to know the judge? And you mentioned it's better to know the judge. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, because it's the law. First of all, the officers that I've always, and all the way up until later, till just the last few years ago, that's where I got my information, and I would be showing this stuff. And they had the laws on the books for everybody else, but then there's the things that they were told to do, the officers and the judges and things that. So if your superiors told you to do something, whether it's illegal or not, that's what they did. They didn't care what the law was. Matter of fact, they'd laugh about the law. I mean, it was humorous to them.
Okay, so who tells the judges? Who tells the judges what to do?
That I don't know. And see, what I've observed, I've only been around the judges briefly. And one thing I've noticed, and I've seen the furious over the officers when they had to go to another jurisdiction, is there seemed to be some infighting between the jurisdictions, even way back then. Because you would be amazed at some of the decisions that would come down, and they would be, the badges would be furious. So there would even be, like territories, I guess you would call them, the way I viewed them as, so it depends. They got scams going so it's multiple, scams going on in questionable activity. It's not just as simple as one area, and it goes up. The higher you go up, the more you're involved, and the more you're in another clique, a higher up clique, if I'm explaining that correctly.
Yeah, you are. And so, can the judges be bought?
I gotta say, I've not seen that, but what I've heard and what I've heard them say, and the furious of them when things go certain ways, I think, I don't think there's a question, can that happen? More than likely it has, and it has, and it will. as far as that goes.
Do you think it might be pressure from, let's say, the mayor's office? Do you think, well, some judges are federal judges, but do you think the pressure comes from within the government, or do you think the pressure comes from like crime, organized crime, or where could it come from? Or could it come from,
combination?
The benefits of
everyone's gets a taste. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
The benefits of life, bribes.
Right. Everyone
cars,
gets a taste.
houses.
Everyone's in on the taste. So therefore, if something happens to a mayor, the mayor knows he's got given some of that taste to the judge. So the judge is going to cover. The chief's getting some of that taste for his department and his guy because he's looking out. So the taste trickles down, and therefore therefore it's very, very in everybody's favor to make sure everything's oiled properly, everything's kept quiet. When this needs to be gotten rid of, But one thing about this that always shocks me, and to this day it does, they will cover up and do all this stuff to protect themselves, but yet they will all seem to keep documents or photographs or something that can, be damning to them and say, okay, this can prove that I've been taking bribes, or I covered up this case. Why they keep that stuff? I think they like to look at it. I don't know. Because every time I'm around different ones, when I was around them, they would always pull something out like that. Oh, here, look at these photos. This is when we blew this guy away. And boy, we thought we were going to get in real bad trouble about this. And you're like, well, wait a minute. So there's a whole risk of situations that are going on here. But, yeah, they involve as many. And they get a little bit on everybody, so nobody's going to want to sit there and to tell on each other. Plus, there's guns involved. There's firearms involved. I say, what if they don't cooperate? We just make them go in first. So what do you think? What do you think that's going to happen? Go ahead.
I think, okay, I'm trying to make sure that our class understands what you said. We make them go in first. So there's a dangerous situation. It looks like there might be guns involved from the other team. And the police say, okay, Bob, Harry, you guys go in first. Because Bob and Harry did something that was not acceptable by the rest of the gang. Is that right?
Yeah, until you prove yourself, or if you done something wrong, or you're just and you're just a rookie, you're just hired. They want to make sure you can be trusted and you are with them 100%. So
do they do things?
There's the initiation process.
That's what I was going to say. So this initiation process, do they make that rookie do something illegal so they now have dirt on that rookie so that rookie has to do what they say?
I got to say that I don't. All I know is when I seen and I would sit next to the phone calls or where they would be planning, I didn't see anybody's. You would see some newer officers sit back and say, well, I don't know, who are you going to be with? Whose side are you going to take? Are you going to back us in the badge? Or, and that was pretty quick. You've seen some hesitation with a few, but for the most part, they just went along because they knew that, hey, that's their career. That's what they want to do. They don't want to get, I just think how frustrating that would be, though, if you were there and you had 10 calls in all severe areas, that the highly crime areas, and they don't like cops at all, and you go in there and they make you go the first one, you got to go in every time. It's like a point in the military. You're the only guy that does point the whole year. That would really mentally get to somebody.
Point means you go first.
Yep.
Okay. So is there such a thing in the military? They have a term for when they shoot one of their own, and sometimes that's called friendly fire. Is there such a thing in the police where there's friendly fire?
Gosh, there's been situations happen that they've discussed with me and told me and showed me information where if they were worried about one officer in particular, he's the only one I knew got arrested, and he died in prison, but there was always that look, if you open your mouth, this is what's going to happen to you or your family. And it was more along the line, those things happen. And when them discussions would, I really didn't even want to be there in the first place. Honestly, because you got to remember, I'm observing this stuff, and you're told to go to these people for help, but you're seeing them shoot people and get away with it because they're mad at somebody or they're drunk. Or the drugs. The drugs is amazing, the amount of drugs they took off people and the cash. You're just seeing this on a daily basis, and so there's a lot of illegal activity where they didn't play no games.
Have you seen some of these police shows like Chicago PD, and where you see the senior guys will keep cash, and they'll take cash off the alleged criminals, and they'll store it. They'll put it in a safe somewhere, and that's their emergency fund if they've got to leave. That's their emergency money for whatever may happen. Do you think stories like that could be true? The kind of things that we see on TV?
Like my dad, he carried one. I don't watch the cop shows. I live enough of it. I got to hear it. But for example, he carried 3 cloth bank bags full of cash. It never left his side. He never left it in our place by himself. He would take it with him. It would go in the trunk. When we got to work, it would go in the car. The vehicle, kept that with him all the time. And my friend, everybody, how come he carries all that cash? Look at all that cash. That was his emergency if he needed cash to do whatever he needed to do. And when it got too much, they would go to Vegas and they would get rid of it. But that's just one of the group that had that. They didn't leave that cash out of their.
That's very interesting what you just said. They'd go to Vegas and get rid of it. Class, I have learned that coin dealers, I'm talking about precious metal dealers, a lot of them go to Vegas. A lot of them. And the question is why? Is Vegas a money laundering capital?
That's what there was a guy that I was supposed to treat him like an officer. He had his own private plane. He's the one that did the transporting. Because my first question was, well, what kind of officer has his own private plane? Well, they gave him a badge. And I'm telling you, that guy, his plane blew up here last year too, over California, and they found out he had a badge from Chicago, 78. I'm guaranteeing if they brought up the manifest, my dad and 4 other guys were on that plane, because they took me home, locked me up, and they got this guy a badge, and they bragged to him when he came back how easy it was where they could just walk through without having none of their things checked. All they got to do is show the badge. And they were just hilarious. And this guy that's supposedly the pilot, now he moved back to Vegas when my dad transferred. So they were there together, and he still maintained that this guy was a cop. Well, apparently that badge was reported stolen, and I'm betting it's from the same district they were at, because they didn't want to talk about it no more. They dropped that real quick.
So I was in my car, and I was traveling through multiple states, and somebody I know was going to the same. It was a convention. Somebody I know was going to that same convention, and we talked about it. And he said, "We'll take my car." And I said, "Tell you what, we'll take my car." And I know my car. I mean, I work on my car, and I know it's mechanically sound, and I maintain it. So I want to drive. I don't want to be in someone's car and be a hostage or, a prisoner because I got to ride with somebody else. They can ride with me, or I'll drive by myself. And so we were traveling through Illinois, your state. And of course, at the time I had a CCW, concealed weapons permit, from the state of Missouri, and it's not recognized by Illinois. And so if you're traveling and you have a handgun, a pistol, in the cabin of your car and you have ammunition and a magazine, you can be arrested. But you can travel with it if it is unloaded, the ammunition is separate from the pistol or the handgun, and it's in your trunk. Meaning you have to have multiple steps to put that ammunition, magazine, and pistol together. And it has to be in the trunk. So we were traveling, we were approaching the Illinois border. I was driving, and I turned to my passenger, who was a former police officer, high-ranking, retired, and I said, I'm going to pull over. We're going to, put our guns in the trunk. He said, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It'll be okay. I'll tell you the rest of the story when we come back. David's with us, and let me just finish this statement, and then Arjun, you're next. Thank you for patiently waiting. So the two of us were traveling through multiple states, and we're approaching Illinois, and I wanted to put my gun, my pistol, and the magazine, and the cartridges in the trunk, because that's what's required by Illinois law, because they don't recognize the Missouri CCW at the time. And my passenger, who was a high-ranking type police type officer, said, it'll be all right, don't worry about it. I couldn't believe it. So, I was not willing to risk it. And I put my gun in the trunk along with, I complied with the law. David, is it true that it would have been all right if we got pulled over?
Yes, you would be amazed at what you would have been able to get away with him in the car. You would be shocked.
Really? So his get out of jail free card, or the equivalent of just being a former cop, if you will, would have been extended to me?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they wouldn't have bothered. They wouldn't not bother. They wouldn't bother you at all. Yeah.
Okay. Arjun in New Jersey, thank you for calling. Thank you for being so patient.
Hey, Vince. Well, I called about cell phones, but like you guys were talking about judges, lawyers, police guys. I can tell you, this system is still better than what I've seen in other countries. So here you can get justice, let's say 60%, 70% of the time. In other countries, if you mess up with people who have power, the chance of getting justice is zero. So it's not possible, if you mess up with anyone with power, whether it's a judge, whether it's a police, and I can tell you a lot of stories on that. But there is no way you can actually mess up with people who have power. But what I called about today was about cell phones. How do you stay away from cell phones? I'm actually addicted to my cell phone. So if I'm addicted, how do I get away with my cell phone? If you can suggest something.
It's easy.
Yeah.
Cold turkey. What that means is if a person's a drug addict, just stop. If you're a smoker, you just stop. So what I did was I got rid of my cell phone. I literally got rid of it, and I said no more. And here's what happened. People would call me up, radio types. Actually, an owner of a network would call me up, not GCN, and he'd say, "Hey, don't you answer your phone?" And I'd say, "I don't have a cell phone, and yes, I do answer the phone when I'm near the phone. But if I'm not near the phone, I don't hear it ringing, and no, I don't answer it." So what has it done? It has been a blessing. I'm not on tap, so someone who's bored, who decides that they think they need to bother me because they're in their car and they're bored and they need entertainment from me, they're out of luck. I just tell them no. And I tell people, listen, I'm sorry if you call here and the answering machine answers. And the reason it does is because I'm not here. If I'm here, I'll answer the phone. If I'm not, I'm sorry. I got stuff to do. I'm busy. I'm a farmer. So I just cold turkey got rid of the cell phone. And then, of course, people, when I make transactions, they'll say, okay, can I put down your cell phone number? They want to track me for a purchase. And I'll say I don't have one. Oh. I just tell them I don't have one. And it's like, I'm the only guy they ever met that doesn't have one. I don't want one. I'm not going to have one. And I consider it a personal tracking, invasion, and spying device that I would be paying for other people to monitor me, and I will not let that happen.
Yes, makes sense. Makes sense. I will try, the only thing is that, like, when I go out, like, I'm not sure about the roads, so I will actually buy a GPS. And
so I have a GPS.
Yes.
I have a GPS. Yes. Now, you're going to be hard-pressed to buy a map.
Yes.
But because I don't think map companies are in business too much anymore making paper maps. But, if you have them, some of the roads are still there, so you can use old maps. You can buy, the Rand McNally atlas or maps of the United States and have it, all in one place, road maps. But, no, I have a GPS. But no, I do not have a separate GPS, an old one, one that does not communicate other than receive. So, I don't have a new car. My car does not communicate with the satellite and tell, the big machine where I am. I'm not interested in that. And people look at me and they say, well, it's an old car. Yeah. And I don't have a phone either.
Makes sense.
And I don't go to restaurants. You don't have to do all those things. You don't. And I'm not going to. David, any quick comments?
No, I mean, it's probably going to be hard to get off of the cell phone thing, but it's doable. It's doable.
Yeah. Yeah. And what you do is, I remember saying on the air, hey, listen, I got rid of my cell phone. I made it all the way to the farm supply store. I made it 2 miles there and back. And then next time I went all the way to the bank, 20 miles there and back. And I was, kind of kidding. But yeah, you can do it. Arjun, thank you so much for the call. David, thank you so much for being with us today.